everyone, I'm so excited. I'm finally here to film a wrap-up video for the month of April. You guys know that I've been super busy the past few months, so reading hasn't really been a priority, but I feel like I'm getting back into a really good rhythm. Actually, in March, I read a few books as well. I just didn't film a wrap-up video, and I'll talk about them super briefly, but I did read The Paper Girls, which is a graphic novel. Sorry, Paper Girls, not The Paper Girls. Which has like a very Stranger Things vibe, and I'm not gonna get into it because I want this to be my April wrap up, but I did really enjoy this. It's a newer graphic novel, I believe. I also listened to Yes Please on audio, narrated and written by Amy Poehler, and I listened to Rising Strong by Brené Brown, which I actually talked about in my Intentional Living books video. So if you want to learn about those, I'll leave that link down below. So instead of rambling on, let's just get into the books that I read in the month of April. In the month of April, my favorite book by far was The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. This book is super hyped on BookTube, and for very good reason. It's such an emotional and powerful and important book on the Black Lives Matter movement. It's about a 16-year-old girl named Star who witnesses her best friend Khalil getting shot by a police officer. I wrote a whole blog post review about this book, which I'll link down below, but basically this book was astonishing. It was like a sucker punch in the heart, but like in the best way. It was just compassionate and electrifying and just complex and mournful and honestly fed up. I gained so much from Star's perspective, and on that note, I do want to say I don't think that this book was written so that white women like me could better understand what it's like for women like Star to live their lives and experience such injustice. This book is clearly written for people like Star whose representation in the media is lacking, so that people of color, so that women like Star can see themselves as the main character and feel known and feel empowered. I really think that's why diversity in books matters so much and why Own Voices books matter so much. But that said, I did learn a lot from her perspective, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I'm incredibly grateful for Angie Thomas's unique and raw, truthful voice throughout this whole book. Anyway, this book was a total page turner. I felt all the feels while I was reading it. I mean, I laughed, I cried, I smiled, I felt sick to my stomach. It was just the perfect character-driven and plot-driven novel. Angie Thomas, she just, she doesn't sugarcoat the truth. She's just incredibly honest, and I feel like Star's grief just rips through the pages as you're reading. I don't think that I could ever forget about Khalil, which I feel like, he's not even, as a character, he's not really even in the book for very long, but that just kind of says it all. I feel like that's exactly what she was trying to accomplish, to just create this haunting presence of something that's so unsettling, but so necessary to see for change to happen. I also read The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater in the month of April, and I am obsessed. Let me tell you, seriously, I am obsessed with the Raven Cycle series. I know that most people on BookTube have probably heard of the Raven Cycle. If you haven't, I don't know where you've been, but I'm finally reading through the series and I'm absolutely loving it. This book took me forever to read. I feel like it was a little bit slow moving in the beginning, but honestly, I feel like it could have had more to do with my schedule and my reading habits and less to do with the actual story. Okay, I'm sorry if everything looks different. I just paused filming for a second to answer my phone. But anyway, yes, The Raven Boys. If you don't know anything about the Raven Cycle, I would be shocked. But basically the first book, The Raven Boys, I read in February, I believe. It's about this girl named Blue who lives with this family of female psychics. And she meets this group of 3 private school boys who are honestly some of the most well-drawn characters I've read about in YA books. The first book kind of launches into the plot with this one intriguing fact about Blue, which is that her whole life she's been told that if she kisses her true love, then he will die. The other thing you need to know about this series, without giving anything away, is that this group of friends, they're on the hunt for something or someone, and it just makes for the best adventures. And it's full of adventure, it's full of danger and intrigue and mystery. I can't really talk about The Dream Thieves without spoiling the first book, but I do just want to say that this book delves into the minds of the 3 boys so much better than the first book. You really get to know, especially Rowan. I think that's how you say his name, but This book explores Rowan's mind, basically. The fact that readers can grow to love Rowan like I did is actually kind of wild, because he is just one of the most unlikable characters in the first book, I think. I think that just really speaks to how complex these characters are, and I don't know, just how talented of a writer she is. Her writing is truly some of my favorite that I found in YA. Also, the magic that's like sprinkled throughout this series is literally perfect. Also in the month of April, I read Monstrous by Marjorie Liu. This is a graphic novel, and I have to admit to you guys, I don't know how I feel about this graphic novel. I know that I was entertained throughout the whole thing. I definitely wanted to keep reading. I wanted to keep turning pages, but I think I've discovered about myself that I'm not sure I'm a graphic novel person. I was just really, really confused, and maybe it's just this book and not other graphic novels. Maybe I shouldn't like throw out all graphic novels. I'm not necessarily doing that, but actually I was talking to Jordan from J Bookish about this, and she helped me kind of understand something that I think is true of me. I think that I'm just not a very visual learner. So when you're reading a graphic novel and you have all of the illustrations that play into the text, I mean, they all work together to tell the story. And I feel like things just kind of slip through the cracks for me. Taking in the meaning behind the illustrations with the text is just not as intuitive for me. I don't know if that makes any sense. I guess it's just that I have to try a lot harder than most people, I guess, to read and actually like understand what's going on in most graphic novels. That said, the illustrations are unreal. Like, they're just so beautiful. And when I stop to appreciate the illustrations, I definitely cannot deny that this is an interesting story. And I was intrigued as I was reading. I guess I'm just wondering what kind of things fell through the cracks for me while I was reading. I feel like most people could get more out of this than I personally did. This is about a world set in an alternate matriarchal 1900s Asia. It's about a girl named Meika, I think that's how you say her name, and she is a half-breed of humans and ancients. She barely survived the war, and she has a deadly secret inside of her that she calls the Hunger, which is basically a powerful monster that she's connected to. She spends years as a slave with her friend Toya, and honestly, the details of that are pretty gruesome. She ends up escaping her life of slavery in the beginning of the graphic novel, and she basically spends the rest of the time trying to figure out what happened, because during this war, hundreds of thousands of people died with one strike. Meiko is definitely an interesting character, and I appreciate the larger meaning behind like her inner struggles and the war within herself and how that was personified by the monster. I also tend to like stories where the main character is a little bit unreliable or like losing her memories in some way, so that, you know, there's a lot left out for the reader and the main character. All in all, it's a story about war and how war changes people and just finding your sense of identity and making the right choices, overcoming evil. It's a steampunk kind of world, so if you're into that, you're probably gonna love it. I was pretty confused by the magic system and seemed to get more and more confused as the story went on. I also just didn't feel like I understood Meika's motivations a lot of the time. I was kind of confused by her motives. And yeah, I don't know, I guess it's pretty common in graphic novels to introduce a lot of characters but not give a whole lot of description about them. So it felt a little bit out of, kind of like all over the place for me. I do think that some of the questions that I had about her, a lot of my questions in general will probably be answered in further issues. So I may consider picking up another issue when it comes out. In the month of April, I also read The Books of Magic by Neil Gaiman. This is a graphic novel that was published in the 90s, and it was so fun to read because it was published in the 90s by Neil Gaiman. And also, I'm listening to American Gods right now on audiobook. I actually have like 2 hours left. But I just loved listening to that while reading this book by him from the early 90s, because I just haven't really gotten into Neil Gaiman, like old Neil Gaiman. I really enjoyed this graphic novel. The artwork was stunning. Absolutely stunning. This is kind of a self-discovery story about a boy who learns from these 4 men that he has a choice to either pursue a path of magic, a life of magic, or to stay normal. They take him on what John Constantine calls the magic mystery tour. As he's learning about, you know, this destiny of magic, there's definitely a Harry Potter vibe going on, which I loved. And also this 4-part mini-series was illustrated by 4 different artists. So the artwork is super interesting. Sometimes it's like this impressionistic, dreamlike illustration, which really mimics the narrative, and other times it's more concrete. Now I have read that this is a lot better, like so much better after you've read the Sandman series, because a lot of the characters that show up are from the DC universe. But overall, I enjoyed it. I was confused in a lot of the same ways that I was confused by Monstrous. But again, I think it's my personal thing with graphic novels. I just think it has more to do with how I consume graphic novels, how I take them in, and less to do with the story. I'm also listening to American Gods, as I mentioned, by Neil Gaiman, and since I have 2 hours left, I figured I would mention it here in my April wrap-up. I know I should technically be including it in my May wrap-up, and I may still talk about it in more detail then, but honestly, I feel like I might miss some things in a May wrap-up, so I just kind of wanted to briefly touch on it now. I'm really enjoying this book, so much more so now that I've been talking to Jordan from GA Bookish about it, because we've kind of both stumbled on the fact that we're both reading it at the same time. And yeah, it's all pretty much about mythology, and so a lot of it goes over my head. I'm not gonna lie. I don't have an in-depth knowledge of mythology. If you do have an in-depth knowledge of mythology, you'll probably love this book. So yeah, a lot of the references kind of go over my head, but and that's why it's been so nice to talk to Jordan about it, because she's watched a lot of interviews and like kind of done her research on interviews with Neil Gaiman, just about American Gods and what inspired him to write it. That really inspired me to do my own research. Probably for the May wrap-up, I'll look into it more, because I do feel like it's one of those books that once you sit in it longer and really think about it and really read up on it, you'll appreciate it better later. Because again, if you do have a more in-depth knowledge of mythology, you will have a more enriched understanding. Basically, this is at the heart of it, an immigration story, or different coming to America stories within it. I agree with Jordan that the best parts of the story were how the gods came to America. I just thought those parts were really, really interesting. The main story, or the most linear story, is about a man named Shadow who is just getting out of prison, and he realizes quickly that the life he left behind is no longer available to him. So he ends up accepting a job from a stranger on a plane to be a hitman. And that's really all you need to know going into it. My favorite description of this book is actually on the blurb, which I have right here. It says, ultimately, he will discover that beneath the placid surface of everyday life, a storm is brewing, an epic war for the very soul of America, and that he is standing squarely in its path. I love that. It's just so, I don't know, it's dark, it's kind of horrific, it's super strange and clever. I don't know, even though a lot of it goes over my head, I feel like I can totally see that it's so well crafted, you know, like even the dream sequences, which you guys know I love a good dream sequence, and Neil Gaiman is the king of dream sequences, especially when you can't decipher what's a dream and what's reality. So I've really enjoyed that. I also read Definitions of Indefinable Things by Whitney Taylor, and while I'm very, very thankful that the publisher sent me this book to read in exchange for an honest review, I have to sadly admit that this book was not for me. I really wanted to love this book, and I think that some younger readers, or more like snarky readers out there, may still enjoy it, especially if you're into like the witty John Green kind of writing. You may still want to give this book a chance. But I just personally could not stomach the YA cliches and the pretentious writing. It wasn't for me. The characters just had the worst attitudes. It was so angsty. And honestly, I didn't like the romance at all. I think the author is talented. The characters weren't for me. I guess I should put it that way. The book is about a girl named Reggie who lives with depression, and she meets a boy named Snake who also lives with a mental illness. And it's all about how Reggie falls for Snake, who also, his ex-girlfriend, is 7 months pregnant. So it's a complicated situation. In the book, Reggie basically has to decide if she's going to let someone in or not. And you definitely get the sense right away that she's an I hate anyone or I hate everything kind of person. Actually, I think it actually says that in the book, that she hates everyone. So yeah, for the most part, I feel like the author accurately portrays depression. I didn't have any issues with how mental illness was talked about. I liked how she talked about how depression and other forms of mental illness can really take on different shapes in our own lives and in the lives of other people we love. I appreciated that. And I also really liked the letter at the very end of the book, and this isn't spoilery, but in the letter she talks about mental illness and she likens the experience of depression to walking a tightrope. And it was really elegantly written. Like, I feel like if the whole book had been written with that same level of vulnerability and I don't know, like humble clarity, I feel like I would have liked it a lot more. I don't think that my opinion is going to be the most popular. Let's put it that way. So if you're still interested in this book, I would definitely give it a go. But yeah, I could not handle the angstiness. Couldn't do it. So those are the books that I read in April. I did it. I finally did a wrap up. I feel so accomplished. Let me know down below what your favorite book was that you read in the month of April. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you have not already, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.